I'm Jean Bender. I'm a volunteer for the ARC of Minnesota. I'm also the parent of a 24-year-old with multiple disabilities, one of which is autism, and I have a 6-year-old nephew who also has autism. And I am by no means the expert on telling your personal story, but what I have done is gotten out there, told my story, written my story, got it to my legislators, and I think it's helpful for you to know I'm not an expert because you don't have to be an expert either. I'm going to give you some strategies today. Take what you can use. I also have a handout that lists some of the material that I'll cover over on the ARC of Minnesota table over there that you can pick up. And I will be here all day today until 2. So if you want a little bit of one-on-one help or some further tips, feel free to stop by and ask questions. I can also, you can take my card and we can touch base later if you'd like some help. So one of the things that I hear most from parents who have kids with disabilities, and particularly kids with autism, is I'm not sure I have time to write my personal story, that I'm pretty busy. And so what I've done is broken down the steps to writing your story and telling your story in 15-minute increments. So you only have to have 15 minutes at any one time to get started, and then you can pick up again where you left off. So with 15 minutes, you can find out who your policymakers are, you can get their contact information, and you can post that by your computer, by your telephone, wherever it'll be handy for you to look up, so that when you have something you want to tell your legislators, you have their contact information handy. You can also read and respond to an action alert from an organization, whether it's an autism organization that you belong to, the ARC of Minnesota, Consortium for Citizens with Disabilities. There's a number of groups that send out emails or email lists that you may be on that say you need to respond to this. And if you've got that number posted, then when you get that action alert, you don't have to start looking things up. You have it right there, and you can take that 15 minutes to respond or forward the action alert. Then after you've done that, maybe you have another 15 minutes, you can forward that action alert to your friends or family who can also respond to the issue. Policymakers like to talk most to their constituents, to the people who they represent, who live in their district. So one of the things that I do is I share my son's story and my nephew's story with the rest of the family. So they don't need to articulate what the issue is. They don't even have to do a lot of research into the position. I can just forward them the information, and then I'm not only sending it out on behalf of myself, but I have my whole family sending it out to their policymakers as well. The other thing you can do is perhaps you don't have time to meet with your legislator today, or you didn't make an appointment, but it only takes you 15 minutes to make, or less, to make a future appointment. So look at a day you have open down the line, and you can make that appointment so that when you have more time, you can go in and meet with your legislator, or your policymaker, or your school representative, or whoever it is you want to share your issue with. You can make that appointment for a day when you're going to have more time. Then if you have a little more time, you have an hour or two, you can write your basic personal or family story. And I'm going to talk in a few minutes about what you can include there. But basically, once you've written your basic story, then you can use that as a base for responding to action alerts, letters to the editor, other kinds of things you want to respond to. You have something already written, and you can just cut and paste sentences or paragraphs to help you figure out, or to help you respond quickly to things that come up. You can also research more information on a topic that affects your life so that you'll be able to speak with more authority. You can always refer people to the organization that sent you the information in the first place if a policymaker or somebody else asks you for more information. But sometimes people want to be comfortable, so you can go look. Most of the websites have position papers and things like that. If you want an example of what I'm talking about, We have a few position papers over at the ARC Minnesota booth. I haven't had a chance to walk around, but I'm sure the other organizations have position papers or their public policy agenda and those kinds of things available. So you can certainly use the time to research something that that you want to know more about, so you're more comfortable speaking or writing about that issue. And then you can phone in to an ARC of Minnesota public policy call or another organization public policy call. I know a number of organizations have open forums or open calls where you can hear a little bit about what's happening that week, what's the urgent issue. Most of the calls tend to be an hour or less, and so that's another great opportunity and a way to use your time in between. And then, of course, if you have a few hours, you can come to things, you can come to activities like what we're doing here today, or you can go to a press conference or another type of public forum. You can go to a workshop or some other meeting that's going to give you more tools or more information for speaking about the issue that's important to you. And certainly if you live in the metro area with a few hours, you can visit the Capitol and actually meet with your legislators one-on-one. You could participate in Tuesdays at the Capitol, which is sponsored by the Consortium for Citizens with Disabilities. The CCD has someone here in the state office building in the basement every Tuesday starting at 10 o'clock where they do a briefing, and then they'll let you know about kind of the issues that are going on right then, give you information so you can go up and go to your legislature, visit your legislators. Sometimes it's helpful to go to a hearing. Perhaps you've been asked to testify at a hearing and you've declined because you don't know what that's all about. Well, if you have an extra day, it's easy to come down here and sit in on a hearing, and then you can hear others testify. You can hear about things that are going on and get yourself more comfortable so the next time you're asked, you can respond. And then if you're already an expert and you've already written your story and you've told your story and you've spoken at press conferences, there's always a need for people to help others. Share your story with others. Give it to people like me or organizations like CCD or Autism Speaks or the Autism Society. Pass that story around and give permission to use it as an example. People have different learning styles, and so if you've already written your story and you feel like it's been pretty effective, you can share that so that other people can look at your story and make it more comfortable for them to develop their own. So I've been talking about how to share your story and what to do and how much time it takes. But what actually does sharing your story mean, and what does it look like? Well, there's some questions that are important to include. Number one would be, what diagnoses, special needs, or challenges do you or your family member have? Policymakers and others need to know what makes your situation unique. How is it different from a typical family situation? Or if you're an adult, how is your living situation different than maybe your siblings or some of your other friends? We need to know specifically. Sometimes this is hard, and you can certainly include what are your strengths, but policymakers need to know what your challenges are too, because usually we're asking them to do something. Vote for a change in policy, appropriate funding, or do something like that. So it's important that they understand why you need it. And where do you live? I touched on that earlier, that we like to, policymakers like to know, are you their constituent? Do you live in their district? And so make sure that you talk about what your address is. But in addition to that, sometimes people are living in their own home. Some people might live in group homes. Some might live in foster homes. It's important to talk about what's the current living situation, and if it's a good situation, what do you need to maintain that situation? And if it's not a good situation, what kind of supports do you need to get out of that situation? So we want to talk about where you live, where you work, do you have access to the community, are you pretty limited or isolated? And then how is that working for you or not working for you? Then talk about what supports that you're getting, and this might be a job coaching program. This might be your special education services, in which case proposed cuts to special ed would be something that you would want to be aware of and respond to. What positive differences do the supports make? If you are an individual living in a group home and there are currently 2 staff so that one person can take individuals out in the community if they'd like, and the other staff people can stay with individuals who don't want to go out at that given time. What will happen if you get cut to 1 staff person? Are you going to be isolated and not able to get out of the community, or are you going to have no choices? You can go bowling or not. You can go to a movie or not. Or we all go, everyone goes, or nobody goes. That's one of the things that we're looking at with some of the proposed cuts is, are we going to start isolating people or really limiting their choices that they have to make in their lives? So you need to talk about what funding you get. In my personal example, I testified earlier in the session about the differences with all of the funding cuts that are happening. The differences in the services that my 24-year-old son received when he was 6 years old, and the services such as personal care attendant that my 6-year-old nephew with autism is not able to have. And so I talked about, when they talk about budget cuts, it's not just about proposed cuts this year, it's also about the cumulative effect of the cuts that have occurred in the last several years. So I do kind of a compare and contrast. When my son was 6, he got these services. This is how it helped stabilize my family. My 6-year-old nephew cannot get these services. As a result, they had a crisis, and now they have child protection services in their life.